the March 31st meeting of the joint SAU 21 school board, and I'd like you to join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I am Meredith Nadeau, Superintendent, and this is the reorganization meeting of the board. So I had the opportunity to start this meeting, but I thought before we take nominations for a new chair, we would start with introductions. So Alex, would you start? We have some new members as well.
Thank you. My name is Alex Rossiger. I'm the chair of the Southampton School Board, and this is my second year.
Nicole Seco, I'm the vice chair of the Winnicott School Board.
Tracy Williams, I'm the brand new elected official from Northampton on the school board.
I am Trisha O'Keefe. I'm the Winnicott representative to the school board. Winnicott School.
Leslie LaFawn's Winnicott chair.
Desiree Potter, Winnicott.
Giselle Urbana, chair for the Hampton Falls School Board, second year.
Wendy Wallace, Northampton School Board. Ashley Haas, second year Northampton School Board.
Andrew Heitman, Northampton School Board.
Lisa Gagalis, I don't even know how many years now, three. Northampton School Board.
Rhonda Evans, I'm the executive assistant to superintendent at the SAU.
Hillary Brown, this is my first year, Northampton School Board.
Casey Hashem, Seabrook School Board.
Lacey Fowler, Seabrook School Board, second year.
Michelle Knowles, Seabrook School Board Chair, 6 months.
Okay, so the first order of business is to take nominations for a board chair. Rhonda attached the policy for you with regard to chair rotation. So I'd like to ask for nominations.
So
guess-
is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
go ahead. Thank you. I think we all have the same question.
Didn't we like defer Seabrook and then they were last year?
Southampton, Becky filled in, yes, last year the board voted to waive the policy and ask Southampton to step in a year early.
So will we vote from Southampton or
So that's,
what's the rotation? Or are we going back to C?
that's for this board to decide.
Okay.
It's not my purview.
Discussion about that, or?
I would,
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure I can speak, I think, pretty confidently for Southampton. We're comfortable moving it back to whoever was supposed to have it. You know, that's, I think, from our perspective.
I'll do it.
Does that move our order though then for next year? Do we then have to flip up Winnicott and then is it gonna mess up the rotation from here on out?
no, I think
Oh,
you
we'll
would
just
We just
resume.
did a
Why
switch.
did they do
Okay,
that
perfect.
last year?
Yeah, I think it's.
Was there a
I
reasoning
think it
behind
was
it?
Maria.
Last year's?
Perfect.
She's never here and she didn't
Works
want
for
it,
us.
I think. I don't know.
We had a discussion about it.
Oh, because I wasn't at that.
Yeah,
I think it was the first meeting. Yeah. Okay.
It was discussed because of the possible separation, we just thought it might be easier for them during that process.
Okay.
They agreed, so we had someone else step in.
Do we have to vote on going out of rotation?
you will need to take a vote to, again, waive your policy because you didn't change it.
Okay.
And
Okay, so I'll make a motion to waive the policy.
Second.
so I have a motion from Leslie and a second from Desiree to waive the policy which had Southampton serving in the 25-26 school year. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none. All in favor of waiving policy A001 chair rotation, please raise your hand. Looks to be unanimous.
Do you want both? Do you want both?
So back to call for nomination.
Well, how much?
I move to nominate Lacey Fowler to serve as the chair of the SAU 21 Joint School Board.
I'll second.
Wendy, a
I just
second.
didn't want to second. If you wanted to give it, I'd give it to you. I just figured.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Seeing none. All those in, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor of Lacey Fowler serving as chair?
My husband's gonna kill me.
Thank
My husband's gonna, thanks, Lacey.
We were gonna nominate you whether you voted
Unanimous.
or not, so thank you.
Step it up.
I know. I live for it. Oh, I hit a gavel. All right. Wait a minute, does she know the rules on the gavel? I'm bright red as my sweatshirt right now.
For the meeting.
Oh, I don't like attention.
How many times
Okay.
a year is it? Would you say? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
At least 5,
at least
usually.
five. Okay, I couldn't remember, so.
Okay. So, on me? All right, bear with me, guys. Okay, so at this moment, we will open public comment or make a motion?
Motion,
No?
nominations for vice chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm rushing the gun. Nomination, does anybody have a nomination for vice chair?
Which one is that? That's gonna be from Winnicott, right?
Typically, that would be from the next district to take over.
I'll nominate Nicole.
I'll second. Should it be Southampton then?
No, because
No, cause they
No.
flipped.
they
They
switched it
served.
last year,
Okay, you don't
and
switch
Jen
roles.
was vice,
Okay.
so, yep. And there was a second? Okay. All in favor?
You want it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, you can vote for yourself, yeah.
She wasn't
Okay.
convincing.
Voluntold.
Yeah. Anybody against? Okay, good.
Well, that'll make me cry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just checking, you never know.
Now, open public comment.
Okay, and now we will open public comment at 6:15. Yep, if you would just come to the podium and state your name and address, please.
It's not out there, but you can use this one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, normally we have the other one set up.
Oh, okay. I gotta practice this at home in the mirror.
Right? You'll be fine.
Good evening, my name is Anne Marie Banfield, I live in Northampton. As many of you know, I had asked for documentation regarding the expenditure for some students to go to Seacoast Youth Services, and I just wanted to make some comments on that. So I looked over the documentation that I had asked for by the SAU and Seacoast Youth Services, and at first Seacoast Youth Services were unwilling to provide the documentation, but they did sending the information to me that I requested in my 91A. I assumed all of this would have been provided to you annually to review Tier 3 services and the expenses involved. The SAU did provide the documentation I requested for instance, on the privacy of students and the contract between the district and Seacoast Youth Services. And while there is certainly language to support the privacy of students who attend Seacoast Youth Services, there always seems to be a lack of information that spells out exemptions in the FERPA law that allows personal data to be shared. Now, I'm not saying that that's indicative of just this district. That's in general in most contracts. That is a glaring omission, whether it be in this district or any other district. All contracts, I think, should close that loophole with specific language, but I did not see that in the contract, or at least explain to parents the exemptions, that there are exemptions, that the information can be shared. I asked if the therapy or services provided to the students were billed to Medicaid or private insurance. According to SYS, the services provided are not covered by either one. These are questions I would hope would have been asked by the board members prior to the contract or the additional amount budgeted in 2025, just as I would want to know. I asked that question. When taxpayers fund Tier 3 services, there is no real reason to withhold this information from the public or from the school board or anybody who asks for it. This is not personally identifiable information. I scanned through the Winnicott school board minutes, and I was unable to locate a school board meeting or discussion on SYS. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anything certainly in depth. And so these are the questions that I would have wanted somebody on the school board to ask. I would have wanted to see the presentation of the contract for all of you to review, copy of any documents signed by parents so they are fully informed about the therapy or privacy protections, privacy policy for students, how you measure effectiveness of the program as it relates to behavior and the cost to the taxpayers, how or why private insurance or Medicaid would not be covering these services. If these are not covered, why are they refusing to cover these expenses? And now taxpayers are required. What metrics will be used to determine if these services are working, and how will those metrics be compared going forward? What does SYS have for liability insurance if they harm a child? These are questions that I expect our school board members, our representatives, to be asking. Now, maybe you did, maybe that's in the minutes somewhere and I missed them, and if I am, I do apologize. I'm more than happy to go through them. But these are the kinds of questions I think we need to be asking. I assumed that this was covered at a school board meeting. I'm now wondering if any of this was presented. This is a costly way to address a child's behavior. I assume school administrators would provide detailed ongoing reports to the school board members in public covering why this change was necessary, how progress or lack of progress would be reported to the board and community, and whether this is a fiscally responsible expenditure. We are going from suspending a student for a behavior problem to now paying for that student to be transported to another facility. How will a therapeutic session improve behavior in a student who is slated to get suspended? Those are fair questions to ask. Measuring the impact of restorative justice on students and behavior is a complicated issue, and research on it is mixed. There's for and against. While some data shows restorative justice reduces suspensions, that doesn't necessarily mean behavior is improving, just that schools are handling discipline differently. Some studies suggest that students and administrators feel that this improves school relationships, but many teachers report more classroom disruptions.
Anne Marie, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So our policy says 5 minutes, so I just want to give you like a 30-second.
I've got like 2 paragraphs.
Okay.
If that's okay. Thank you. I appreciate the consideration. Academic performance does not seem to improve much either. In a 2019 RAND Corporation study found that while suspensions dropped, classroom behavior got worse, and there was no improvement in student achievement. Similarly, a study published in the Journal of Youth and Adolescence in Maine found no real difference in school climate between schools that used restorative justice and those did not. Last paragraph. The real question is whether spending money on this program is a good investment. If the school district can't clearly explain they will measure success or provide solid independent research proving that this program works, then it's completely fair to question whether this is the best use of taxpayer money. There needs to be a clear plan for accountability, or this can end up being another expensive education experiment with no real results. Finally, when I look at the proficiency scores at Winnicott High School, especially for math in the 30s and has been there for the last 3 years, I think we need to look at where we're spending our money and prioritize it. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else from the public like to speak? Okay, we'll keep public comment open for another 25 minutes. And we will move on to New Hampshire School Board Association training.
Yes, so Barrett Christina, the Executive Director of the School Boards Association, is here, and we hope that technology is going to work for us. It looks like it's ready to go. I'm going to move myself out of the middle here.
Thank you, Superintendent Nato. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces. My name is Barrett Christina. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire School Boards Association. Thank you for inviting me to SAU 21. This is a number of years in a row that Meredith has invited us to come on out at your organizational meeting to provide a quick primer, a quick overview on school board responsibilities. Superintendent Nato tells me I've got about 30 minutes or so to get through the slides and then leave some time for question and answer. Quickly, before I get into the materials, if you will, I see a typo on page 1, fantastic. You've got a packet of materials with sort of our logo and letterhead, and then the second slide says slide index. That's what I'm going to be working off of tonight. You've got a larger packet of materials that's maybe 30 or 40 pages long, called Resources for Boards, for Board and Board Members. Roles and responsibilities, that's to read in your own time. And then right to know law resources as well too, just for some of the new school board members to familiarize with some of that stuff. I do want to ask though too, I know that we're either being live streamed or recorded, and this microphone picks it up for the people at home. Is it imperative that I stand at the podium? If it is, that's fine. I like to walk around a little bit, and that's absolutely fine if you want me to stand here. My style is I try to kind of walk around a little bit, so long as if I can walk around with them. I'll stand here as best I can. All right, instead of trying to walk around. I got it. That's fine. I got it. Thank you, Meredith. This says, how many new people do we have here? Like newly elected as of what, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So about a quarter of the board, if I'm not mistaken. So I hope I don't rush too fast then. So a lot of you, this is going to be old hat. We've been through this a number of times, so I appreciate you bearing with me. The new people, if I'm going along too fast and you would like the School Boards Association to come out and spend a little bit more time with you, reach out through Meredith, have us schedule that, and we're happy to come out to your local school board at any time to have a more in-depth conversation. So there's the slide index right there, 3 core principles with that typo. We'll be sure to get that changed for the moving forward. So the School Boards Association advocates that there are 3 core principles for school board members to identify. The first core principle, and this one is my favorite, the purpose of school boards, RSA 189:1-A, and for the newbies, RSA, I don't mean to sound patronizing, but an RSA is a state statute. The revised statute annotated is what that stands for, and there is a section that deals with school boards, RSA 189. And RSA 189:1-A talks about the purpose of school boards. It shall be the duty of the school board to provide at district expense elementary and secondary education to all pupils who reside in the district. That is basically fulfilling the duty of the school board and your sole purpose of a school board to make sure that the children in your community are getting an education. We certainly understand, NHSBA certainly understands that we have multiple constituencies, right? We've got parents, we've got students, we've got taxpayers, we've got teachers, we've got administrators. Cities have to deal with city councils. You may have to deal with your select board from time to time on a particular issue. So we understand that how a school board is going to achieve that responsibility of providing an education to all the children in your community. That's why we have elected school boards, to debate, discuss, deliberate, and ultimately vote and act on what direction the school board wants to go in, whether or not that's funding particular programs, whatever you do with the budget. We'll talk about some of the budgetary responsibilities in a little bit. But whenever you have a question before the board and you're trying to figure out, what do I do with this? And you're hearing from your multiple constituencies, always come back to this statute, that it's your responsibility to provide an education, and ask yourself how this is going to impact children. The decision that the board makes, how is it going to impact kids? Obviously, as I said, we have to keep in mind tax rates and taxpayers and property taxes and the litany of other constituencies that I mentioned, but let that be your driving force. Let this statute be your driving force when you're making challenging decisions. The second core principle is recognizing the difference between collective authority and individual authority. The school board has collective authority, meaning that the board can only act at a duly called meeting, posted under the right to know law, with a quorum of you there to debate, discuss, and deliberate upon an action, and then ultimately, or upon an issue, and then ultimately take a vote. A motion is made, and you take a vote. No individual board member has any greater authority or any greater power than any other board member, except in the situations when the board as a whole collectively decides to give an individual school board member certain responsibilities or certain authority. For example, we'll talk about your policy. We talked about policies at the beginning of the meeting. You had to waive a policy tonight. We'll talk about the school board's policy-making responsibilities in a couple more slides. But you probably have a policy that talks about the authorization or responsibilities of the board chair, right? To call the meeting to order, maybe make committee assignments, help set the agenda with the superintendent, be the spokesperson, sign certain documents on behalf of the board. But it's not like the board chair simply assumed that authority, right? The board, collectively adopted a policy giving some of that authority or responsibilities to an individual board member. But the only inherent authority an individual board member has is to attend the meeting, sit up at the table, debate, discuss, deliberate, and ultimately vote on the issue before the board. The third core principle, governance, not management. The school board governs the school district. You're a governing body, right? And the superintendent manages the school district. As we have in the red language there up on the slide, it's not the school board's job to run the schools, but rather to see that the schools are run well. The board sets policies, vision, and goals for the district and helps fulfill them through oversight of the administration. The board's functions are primary legislative, like the legislature adopting a law, you're adopting policies. There are some limited executive functions that the school board does have, and we'll talk about those in a couple more slides, as well as some quasi-judicial responsibilities that the school board has when we're talking about perhaps disciplining a student or a teacher non-renewal or a teacher discipline, things along those lines. The superintendent, though, implements through the management responsibilities of the superintendent, implements the policies, visions, and goals of the school board, manages all the operations of the district and its schools, and advises the board regarding its legal obligations, practical considerations regarding the policy, budget, so on and so forth. If you want to see the litany of responsibilities that fall on the superintendent, take a look at RSA 194-C:4, paragraph 2. And then you get a laundry list, subparagraph A through R or S or T or something like that, that talks about all the responsibilities of the superintendent. And if you look at those, you'll see that those tend to fall into what I'll call the day-to-day oversight of the school district. Payroll, cash flow, transportation, special education, federal responsibilities, oversight and evaluation of staff and students, buildings, grounds, maintenance, things of that nature. And I'm looking to see in the larger packet that we're not going through, the one titled Resources for Boards and Board Members, I think we have that listed starting on page 13. That statute is in there. But again, I sort of conceptualize the difference between the governance and the management aspect. Is the management is the day-to-day operations of the school district, making sure the buses are running, the boiler is working, the staff are on time, and then the governance is sort of the 30,000-foot view, providing proper oversight of your superintendent, adopting policies, you don't adopt the budget, but developing a budget that puts out to the voters, and we'll get a little bit more in depth with that as well too. But again, governance versus management. The school board governs the school district. The superintendent, through his or her administrative team, manages the school district on a day-to-day basis. Relationship between the two domains, some examples here. So as I mentioned I mentioned RSA 194C, but there's also 189:24 is. Did somebody say something? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought somebody was chiming in with a question or a comment. That's fine. As well as Department of Education Rule 302 and 303. Those are also important laws that you have to look at in identifying the school board responsibilities. There is a Department of Education rule, Department of Ed ED 302.01 and 02, that talk about duties and responsibilities of the superintendent, and some of those mirror what is in RSA 194C4. And then there's also a Department of Education rule, ED 303, that talks about the roles and responsibilities of the school board. And if we look through that, and I think it's in the larger packet of materials, you'll find that the school board responsibilities are all policy making within that Department of Education rule. Again, I mentioned 194C4, 30201, 30203, assign all aspects of management to the school districts. In more general terms, the superintendent, per the Department of Education rules, is the executive officer who performs administrative and leadership services to the district, and those are further defined and directed by the governing body. Yeah, go ahead.
You referred to the education rules. Are you talking the state of New Hampshire?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Yep, New Hampshire, yes, rules adopted by the New Hampshire State Board of Education through the Department of Education.
Distinguish it from a federal.
Yeah, yes, correct, exactly. Yep, thank you for the question and allowing me to clarify that. So when we say that those services are further, quote, defined and directed by the governing body, what are we talking about? We're talking about your policies again, right? How many, the returning board members, how many of your policies start by saying something along the lines of the superintendent shall or the administration shall, right? You're directing the superintendent to do something in particular, whether or not that's fill out a report, or you're providing some level of oversight, or the superintendent shall develop internal administrative rules to help guide the processes that are going on either in Matt's business office or with the school nurse or whatever the case may be. Any other questions while we're moving along? I know I'm talking a mile a minute. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Alrighty. The executive functions of the school board. Make sure I didn't skip a slide here. Nope, I'm good. Remember a couple slides previous, we talked about the executive functions of the school board. When we talk about the board serving as a legislative body, think of what does the New Hampshire legislature do, right? They pass laws and they pass a budget. What does the school board do? You adopt policies, i.e. laws of the school district, and you present a budget to the voters. It's a legislative function, policy and budget, legislative functions. The executive functions, though, is hiring and evaluating the superintendent. You're not passing a law, you're not adopting the budget, but you're providing direct oversight to the one employee that the SAU board oversees. And I know I'm sure I've got the answer the last 5 times I've been here, but I always have to ask, you have an evaluation process? You're doing that tonight. And none of them are great, some of them are good. You tweak them a little bit every year, I would imagine, and new board members come on, and absolutely. So the one thing that I will say, if you're struggling with your superintendent evaluation process, there's misery in company. Every school board has challenges with that. Part of it is, I can come up with a template or a document to give you, or a rubric or a matrix. I've been looking for like the perfect one for 20 years now, and I can't find it. But along with that, I often say that the best evaluation models or systems are developed locally, right? Why is that? Well, because SAU 21 is inherently different than, say, Rochester, right? You've got 5 school boards here, if I'm not mistaken, 21, 23 school board members. It's going to be very different evaluating a superintendent in a multi-district SAU than it's going to be in a single district K through 6 district, for example, like, Northwood or Nottingham or Stratford or Barrington. I won't go through the rest of that slide just in the interest of time, but there's an evaluation cycle. It involves goal setting, timelines, and robust conversation. One aspect that we do recommend, that there are sort of mini evaluations throughout the course of the year. You don't just evaluate in March or April of every year. You do a check-in, at the end of the school year. You do a check-in in September, October, after, say school's been open for a month. You do a check-in maybe before annual meetings. I know that timing, January through the middle of March always gets hectic for everybody. So, but don't just wait until, your deadline and your contract or your policy to get the evaluation done. It should be an ongoing process. Let's see here. Again, superintendent is charged with day-to-day management operations. There's no hiring the superintendent. Board oversight comes through constant, communication and annual evaluation. The superintendent eval is a whole other. We could do a whole other webinar on that as well too. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that tonight, and I don't want to say something that's going to bog down the conversation you're having in like a half hour or anything either. So, but again, there's really no prescribed process in statute for doing that. One of the last semblances of local control, I presume. This slide is I don't know what you call it, not really a chart, but this is sort of a quick, easy guide that identifies and delineates the board's governance responsibilities and the superintendent's management responsibilities with a list of categories: policy and decision-making, board meetings, budget matters, curriculum and instruction, student services, personnel, so on and so forth. And it's just a quick, easy guide for board members and administrators to identify sort of where that delineation of responsibilities rests. And just I want everybody to be clear too, especially the new school board members. Part of this presentation is quote unquote best practices that any school board association in the country is going to recommend. A lot of this is also dictated by statute and the Department of Education rules. So when I'm saying that the superintendent is responsible for the day-to-day oversight of the school district and the budget and the buses and the buildings and the boiler work, and that's all in statute. That's all in that statute I keep coming back to, 194C4, where it lists out everything that the superintendent is responsible for. And if you were to go through the litany of statutes that we have regarding public education, the board's responsibilities are pretty limited. You've got to meet, a certain number of times per year. You've got to do your budget in accordance with RSA 32. You've got budget responsibilities for Winnicott being a co-op, a little bit of a different animal. Oversight of the superintendent, policy making, so on and so forth. So I just want to make sure that that's clear as well too. And again, the larger document has more of those, I think, citations, if you will, to the New Hampshire Department of Education rules and the particular statutes that outline and delineate this. All right, I think I'm about halfway through. Legislative functions, governance through policy and decision making. We've talked about this a little bit. We always say that by and large, the school board is a policy making body. Those are your primary functions. And when I talk about policies, there's two different kinds of policies that I want to identify. The first is what I'll call big P policy. Like we discussed at the beginning of the meeting tonight, you had to waive policy XYZ or ABC or whatever the call letters are. That's big P policy. That goes in your policy manual. They're all coded. There is rhyme and reason to the coding system. That's a whole other discussion. And you'll notice that your policy book, though, has different categories, right? A, B, C, D. B governs the board operations. C is administration. J is students, if I'm not mistaken. I is curriculum. I forget whatever the one is that governs. What's that? K is community relations. Exactly. You've got one that deals with staff too. I forget. J. I've done policy in a while, so. But anyway, that's big P policy, and if you've seen your policy manual, there are probably about 70, 75 policies that are required by both state and federal law. The School Boards Association keeps on file probably another 100, 150 that we categorize as recommended policies. We recommend school boards have these in place. And then we keep another 200 on file that we just call optional, where we don't have a preference one way or the other if a school board adopts it. We keep it on file in case a school board calls us and says, do you have a policy on XYZ? We've got a sample policy that we can provide them. It's more a resource for school boards. But your policy can also be little p, where, everything that, aside from the executive functions, lots of other aspects fall into quote-unquote policy decision-making that school boards make. Let's take your budget, for example. Your budget is an example is a policy decision. What does SAU 21 value, or what does Winnicott value, or Southampton, or Northampton, or Hampton Falls, right? Do you want to have, new Chromebooks for all the kids in the school, or do you want to buy, new band uniforms? That's a policy decision. Do you need to fix the roof this year, or are we going to buy a school bus? That's a policy decision. Your budget is all policy decision. What are you going to fund? Are you going to fund extracurriculars? Are you going to fund athletic teams? Some districts that got hit with budget cuts this year are doing pay to play, and they're cutting they're cutting field trips and things of that nature. So, but the reality is too with your budget, won't make too big of a deal of this, but how much of your budget do you really get to play with in any given year? 3% maybe, if that. So, most of those are fixed costs to begin with, and things are either contractually obligated to provide or statutorily obligated to provide. But again, they're all big P or little p. Your board is, anytime the board's making a decision, it's generally a policy-making decision. We talked about the sort of the NHSBA sample policies. I won't go through that. You can look at that in your own time. One caveat though, again, our policies are sample policies. They're templates. We have about 162 members in members of NHSBA. We obviously can't draft 162 different policies for 162 school boards. And as you can imagine, not to sort of identify or pick on my good friends from Southampton, your policy needs may be a little bit different than, say, Manchester or Nashua, right? So we always say work through your administration, amend it as you need, work with local counsel if needed, or if you have questions that, your board chair or Meredith wants to call and say the Winnicott board took policy XYZ and we're thinking of changing this paragraph, our staff attorney is happy to work through that with you and like, no, you got to leave that language because that's what the statute says, or yeah, you do have a little bit of flexibility with this provision of the policy. So go through them. My point being, go through them before you just adopt them. My favorite example of a board not doing that, this was probably 10 or 15 years ago, I was doing a policy review for a school district, and they sent me their hard copy policy manual, and they didn't even take off like NHSBA sample policy and put in like, XYZ school board. It was like the policy that we had sent out in that form with the same italics, the same headings. I don't even know if the board adopted them. I think they just stuck them in the policy manual. So that was a little problematic. Moving on, some more of the, I talked about this a little bit. Set and establish budget and provide budget oversight. It's a fiscal expression of policy. When we say set the budget, that's a little bit of a misnomer. We know that the voters, ultimately set the budget. But the laws and regulations require the school board to propose an operating budget, both per RSA 32 and Department of Education Rule 303.01. Do you have any BudComs here in the SAU? Any of your communities have municipal budget committees? So even if you have those municipal budget committees and it's their budget that is presented at the budget hearing, and it's their budget that goes on either your warrant or discussed at either your deliberative session or your annual meeting, depending on what form of annual meeting you have. The school board still has a responsibility to make recommendation to the budget committee and come up with its own proposed and recommended budget as well too. So, but even once the budget is passed, the board provides budget oversight and approvals for prioritization of spending through manifest review. RSA 197.23A, we've got a sample policy on that. Line item transfers, RSA 32:10, we have a sample policy on that. And requests for reports and information. I don't know, how often, Matt is running reports for boards, whether that's once a month or every meeting or quarterly, however, again, that's the type of thing every district does it a little bit differently, and every board wants it a little bit differently. So you're getting financial reports, and I presume there's an opportunity for the board members to review them and ask questions if needed, and even if the answer isn't readily available at Meredith or Matt's fingertips, they can get it for you. Questions? Alrighty, I'm trying to be respectful of your time. I'm trying to get through this. And strategic planning. School Boards Association highly recommends that school boards engage in strategic planning. And Department of Education Rule 303.01G does not use that phrase specifically, but it says that school boards shall, quote, develop long-range plans and identify measurable and attainable short-term objectives. I just categorize that as strategic planning. And let me ask, of the five boards, again, am I right? How many of those boards have a strategic plan? Winnicott?
Yeah.
Yes?
We all have a shared portrait of a learner, and then each
Okay.
individual district has adopted goals.
Yep,
like
okay.
School improvement.
Okay,
goals.
fantastic. So you've got Portrait of a Learner as an SAU-wide initiative, if you will, and then each district adopts their own goals yearly basis, generally. Do the board's goals relate to the portrait of a learner, at least to some level?
Depends on the board.
Depends on the board? Okay. So anyway, I just do that for my own knowledge. I like to see sort of where boards are when I'm doing these trainings. You know, the reason that NHSBA recommends boards engage in strategic planning, you know, it impacts your personnel, it impacts your instructional resources, impacts your capital needs and maintenance, provides paths to accomplish board's priorities, and it leads to efficient meetings. For boards that have established goals or have done some goal setting or strategic planning, I recommend that every meeting you have an agenda item that relates to those goals. So it's fresh, so it's constant, so it's a reminder. And then, you know, in some meetings it may be a 3-minute discussion item, other meetings it may be a 30-minute discussion item, right? It may be, oh, the committee couldn't meet because of the snowstorm last week, but we're meeting again in another week. Other times it might be, where are we on this? Have we benchmarked it? Do we need to allocate resources? Does the superintendent need support and resources to be able to implement the goals that the board wants her to implement? Anyway, I've seen a lot of boards, they spend time, effort, money, and resources on a strategic plan, and then it goes on a shelf somewhere, and nobody, it's never a living document. Do you have a strategic plan? Yeah, I think we did something 3 or 4 years ago. I haven't looked at it, but you know, if you keep it fresh and keep it going and keep it on the meeting or on the agenda of each board meeting, you know, your new school board members will be able to hopefully come in and kind of pick up where everybody, you know, everybody's left off, or they're familiar with it, or whatever the case may be. I'll move off of that. 8 slides left, and I'll be very quick on these. Communication. So, you know, obviously when we say communication, we mean things beyond what the right to know law requires. Posting the meeting, posting the minutes, responding to right to know law inquiries. You know, when we used to do our new school board member orientation in Concord pre-COVID, we'd get 100, 120 new school board members in our office building in Concord. And I look across the crowd, having done this for a while, and I used to be able to identify the people that were parents, right? That's why they ran for the school board. So I'd say, how many of you ran for school board because you've got kids in the district? And 2/3 of the hands would go up, right? And I'd purposely call on somebody that didn't raise their hand then, and I'd say, sir, ma'am, why did you run for the school board then if you don't have kids in the district? And the second most common reason that you know, this is not you know, there's no scientific method to this, but the second most common reason that I heard in front of a room of 100 new school board members over the course of 15 years was, I wanted more or better communication from my school board. Now, I don't always know how to sort of implement that, more communication. Okay, well, we did 1 newsletter a month, we'll do 2. That's more communication. Better communication, you know, to some degree that also falls on the constituent too, right? Come to the meetings, watch the meetings, read the minutes, so on and so forth. You know, we've got various legal requirements. Your annual report has to have certain things in it in RSA 198:4. There's a family engagement provision in the Department of Education rules. We have various policies on parental and pupil rights, meeting notices, as I mentioned. And remember, going back to the beginning of my presentation when we talked about RSA 189:1-A and all the various constituencies that you have, right? You've got to be mindful that not every constituency is going to communicate in the exact same way, right? Parents these days, right, most parents, this is how they communicate, right? They get the text message, or they have an app to communicate with the teacher during the day. I forget what the name of them are called. Or they're on, you know, some districts have, you know, active social media presence. I go back and forth on that and whether or not that's a good idea or not. We've got text message alerts for snow days and robocalls and whatnot. Be mindful of your other constituents that aren't glued to their phone, though, right? And how are you going to reach out to them, whether or not that's the, you know, elderly people in your community, or I would imagine that, you know, we think everybody has a smartphone these days. That's not the case. We've got a lot of parents who are, you know, are still doing the is it a cricket phone that's like the 30 days when they run out of minutes, they run out of minutes. So we can't always just rely on on sort of the digital method of communicating with all of our constituents. So one simple way that I like the Concord School Board, through I guess mostly the summer and fall months, there's a farmer's market in downtown Concord, right by the state capitol. A number of years ago, the Concord School Board went to the people that organized that and said, do you mind if we put up a booth? And they rotate through, so whenever Saturday mornings or whatever it is, they get 2 school board members that they put up a banner, Concord School Board, and people are coming able to ask questions with whatever they have. You know, whatever the people in town want to know, they're there and open and accessible. And if they don't have the answer right then and there, they write down the email and they make sure either the superintendent or the building level principal or the board chair follows up with a phone call. Simple ways to reach your constituents. So be mindful of that. Continuing on, collective bargaining. Anybody have to bargain this past year? Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I have a question on that one, on
Yeah.
the Concord one, and having school board members out there.
Yeah.
The first slide is so I guess my question is, if a question is answered by a school board member in something like that,
Yeah,
it really doesn't hold water because,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
no,
just
right.
saw something.
Are they, I mean,
I
to
guess
some
that-
degree, they're speaking on behalf of the board because the board has authorized them to be there. I mean, you need your board members certainly to be mindful of giving out accurate information.
Right, I
You
guess
know.
that just.
Yeah,
just
and I
makes me
think
nervous.
more than anything, if the board member is going to do that, or a board is going to undergate, just if you don't know the answer, say I don't know, but I'll have somebody get back to you. That's imperative. I think the other aspect of it though is just they're getting good PR because they're available and they're seen in the community.
Yeah.
There's-
Yeah, I could see doing that and just like with, saying these are the things we're doing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
But I just,
Yep.
I guess I just get nervous.
Yeah, no, yeah, and, yeah.
Especially in
There's
this climate
certainly.
Where it's just, there's.
Yeah, you don't want to get a gotcha question and then somebody's posting, well, Leslie told me at the farmer's market X, Y, and Z, and 300 comments later, yeah.
Said go for the watermelons.
Yeah.
Right. No,
They
I
weren't
hear
any
you.
good, so,
I hear you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you've got to, set some ground rules if you were going to do something like that.
Yeah,
But
I like the PR part of it. I
yeah,
just get
the
nervous.
visibility of the PR, I think, is there's benefit to that in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions? How am I on time? I know I'm getting there. And we started a little bit late. Collective bargaining, did anybody bargain this year?
No, we bargained together and we're good.
Oh, that's right, you only have one collective bargain, yeah, that's right. Two, right, well, one for the teachers throughout all the, yeah, I forget about that, so. I won't spend a lot of time on that. Because I wanna be mindful. Other board executive functions, hire and evaluate the superintendent, quote-unquote, elect certified employees and others designated by board policy. When we say elect, when we say certified employees for the new school board members, when we talk about quote-unquote professional employees or quote-unquote certified employees, those are employees whose position within the school district requires certification through the Department of Education. So your teachers, your media, library media specialists, your guidance counselors, principals, special ed directors, BAs don't need to have certification anymore, you used to. And whoever else, any person whose job requires certification. The board, and this is ancient language, quote unquote, elects that individual. And you're probably gonna see it in the next 10 days or so. Meredith is gonna be giving you a list of employees, depending on how you do it. Every district does it a little bit differently, so my process is I explain it, isn't in whatever, just go with it, and Meredith has a handle on this. You're going to, every year you have to, quote unquote, elect employees, meaning the superintendent makes a recommendation to the school board. I recommend that we rehire Sally Jones, second grade teacher. And it's not that direct, you're not doing that for every employee, I presume it's a list or a document of some sort. But that list is basically, Meredith is recommending Sally Jones as a second grade teacher, right? Johnny Johnson as the high school, football coach, or the high school social studies teacher, whatever the case may be. The board then accepts those, or does not accept those recommendations from Meredith. You are electing that individual. Basically, superintendent makes a recommendation, the board either accepts or rejects that nomination for your certified staff. For your non-certified staff, custodians, bus drivers, food service workers, paraprofessionals, whoever else you may have, that's going to be a function of board policy. Some boards want it run through the board, right? Every custodian that's in the gym on a Saturday morning for 5 hours cleaning up after the basketball game. Some boards want to sign off on that. You know, you can imagine in places like Manchester or Nashua, there's no way the board can get involved in hiring every paraprofessional that comes. I mean, that'd be their only job. You know, every paraprofessional that comes through the door, every custodian or food service worker that works in the district. So, in my experience, the smaller the district, the more hands-on the boards are with those. The larger district, the less hands-on the board is with those. Other executive functions enter contracts on behalf of the school district. Oftentimes, the superintendent is delegated, or the board delegates to the superintendent to sign those contracts. Presumably, there's some discussion with the school board ahead of time. And multi-year contracts need approval by the legislative body. If you're leasing photocopiers for 10 years, you got to put that out to the voters. Anything with a like your collective bargaining agreement, essentially needs to be Sanbornized, as they say, where you lay out the cost over the course of the contract. I'm talking a lot of words in a short amount of time, folks. Quasi-judicial, board is a judicial body. So we talked about the board serving as a legislative body by and large. There are times when the school board has to serve as a quasi-judicial body or an adjudicative body, where the board has an impact over somebody's rights. Usually a student discipline matter, if the superintendent is recommending that a student be suspended for, say, 30 days. We've got student expulsion, manifest educational hardship. That's where an individual comes and makes a request to the school board that my child, as a parent, my child is having a being in their current educational setting is detrimental to their education, and I would like the school district to pay for them to go to a different school district. And then some others by policy. Employees, we have dismissal, non-renewal. A dismissal is when you want that employee, or the superintendent wants that employee out of the building immediately. Usually because there's a health and safety risk to staff and students, caught with drugs. There's your neighbors to the west of a few miles are going through that right now in Sanborn Regional, as you may have seen in the news. Versus a non-renewal. A non-renewal, all teacher contracts, not the collective bargaining agreement, but the individual teacher contract, Sally Jones, second grade teacher, those are all one-year contracts, right? They're always one-year contracts. And so the non-renewal, if you're a probationary teacher, 5 years in your current school district, you're right out of UNH or Keene or Plymouth or wherever, 5 years, you're a probationary employee. You can be non-renewed at any time, and you don't have any right to know the reasons for the non-renewal. You don't have any right to a hearing before the school board. For non-probationary teachers, they have non-renewal rights if they've been teaching in the districts for 10 years, but their performance has been lacking the last number of years, and Meredith or the principal have the evaluations that they're slow, they're late, they come in late all the time, they're absent all the time, they're mean to the kids, they're yelling and screaming, can't manage the classroom. The annual evaluation will show that, and then Meredith may be, upon the recommendation of the principal, presumably, I don't want this person back in the second grade classroom. So that person, again, if they were in the district for, say, 10 years, they have a right to a hearing before the school board. If you had to do any non-renewal hearings, from time to time you have to, right? Not many, 1 or 2, 1 year maybe? Yeah. What's that?
Not many.
Yeah, most of the time, good administrators, if it's not going well, good administrators can kind of counsel those people out of the classroom from time to time. You know, it may be the district, it may be the career. You know, there's a different reasons for that. So, but my point being is, from time to time, the board has to serve as a quasi-judicial body where you're serving as judge and jury over and are impacting somebody's rights. What do judges and juries have to be at their core, right? Free from bias, free from prejudice. It's not the jury standard. We're not going to sequester people during the course of a 2-day non-renewal hearing. But, you know, don't read Facebook, you know, if it was a dismissal, and don't look on Facebook, don't ask your kid, if your kid's in that school, what's going on with the teacher. Don't talk to your neighbors, don't call the teachers. I get you're in a small community and some of the noise is unavoidable, I totally understand that, but you've really got to distance yourself, and you've really got to make sure that your decision in that hearing is based solely on the information that was presented at that hearing. And it's like a mini trial. Meredith and the principal are going to be standing there with an attorney, almost like the prosecutor. Then the teacher or the employee is going to be standing over here almost as a defendant with their attorney. And then the board is going to be up there, the 5, 7, 9 of you, whatever it is, as a jury, as a panel. Sometimes you have an attorney there with you. We certainly recommend that. And the prosecution makes their case, shows the evaluation, brings up witnesses, you know, brings up other teachers or parents that saw this person dragging a kid, hitting a kid, yelling at a kid, whatever it might be. And then this person, then the teacher is going to be there with, you know, other teachers. Nope, she's a great teacher. Oh, you know, this teacher saved my kid's life. I know that they'd be a dropout if it wasn't for this teacher that really took my kid under their wing. And then ultimately you have to make a decision. So, anyway, quickly again, just, yeah, go ahead.
Decisions also public? In other words, all those in favor, say aye.
So the individual whose rights are being impacted, whether it's the student or the staff member, they have a right to do the hearing in non-public session if they so choose. The person whose rights are being impacted has that right to choose.
In public or not?
In public or non-public, yes. Yeah, I've seen student matters, usually the parents are gonna be like, yeah, we're going into non-public session because we don't want the world to know that, you know, our kid did this thing. And teacher ones, depending on how popular the teacher is, or if it's a popular principal or a popular, you know, teacher, you know, oftentimes they want it in public session so they can kind of get the public there and the kids there that they supported and so on and so forth. But yeah, the individual whose rights are being impacted has the choice of public or non-public session. We talked about this, free from bias. I'm sorry I ran late.
Connect that, Barrett, because I'll hear, I think you kind of went there, but I'll hear from time to time, how come we didn't know about X, Y, Z?
Yeah. So that's a good question. You know, if there's an incident at school, I guarantee you, I don't know if it's like in the laws of nature or some seismic event, the school board members are always the last people in the community to know what was going on. It's the way it happens, right? You're not gonna have any idea what happened. You're gonna be stopping in Hannaford on the way home from work to grab a gallon of milk, and 5 people are gonna come up to you and say, why were there 3 police cars at the high school today? It's going to happen. The 5 of you, 7 of you, again, whatever, always the last people to know. And we know it's gonna be on social media before anybody else knows. Why? Because every kid in the district's gonna pull this out and video film the fight or the teacher throwing a desk across the room or whatever the situation might be. They're often, for administrators, it's often a challenging balance on how much information and what specific information to give the school board. You know, text messaging is always a little, you know, the emails presuming are secure, and, excuse me, you know, they may become public records. You know, what often happens, what we generally recommend, excuse me, I got a burp, is that, you know, to the extent possible and as soon as possible, you know, after dealing with the police and the teachers and the principals and who knows what else, the superintendent sends an email and just says, FYI, board members, you're going to hear that there were 2 police cars at the high school at noon today. I don't want to divulge any information over email, but the next time we meet, we'll go into non-public session and I'll fill you in on what I can. And if the next board meeting isn't for a month or 2 weeks, the board wants to call an extra meeting, they can do that. If the board wants to say, Meredith, nope, we want to know right now, you know, obviously respecting your administrator's, you know, schedule and calendar, the board can do that. You know, But what, it's not that the superintendent or the administration is trying to keep anything from the board. They're trying to contain the situation as it occurs right now. And then you get into the non-public session, a little bit of detail is fine. The cops came and they arrested a kid for selling drugs in the bathroom, right? You don't need to know what the name of the kid, you don't need to know what drugs, you don't need to know who bought it, the names of the kids who were buying the drugs. You don't necessarily need to know, where the police or the principal got their information from, what kid turned them in. You just need to know that there was an incident, and this is what it was. It was a fight, there were drugs, whatever the case may be. And I mentioned social media. It's gonna be, it's gonna be on social media. You're gonna hear about it anyway. Be mindful of what you hear and believe. Be mindful of where you're getting your resources. But the other reason that the superintendent has to keep things locked in, depending on the nature of the issue, there may be either criminal investigations or an outside investigation that needs to be handled by, you hire an attorney to do that. And those are not cheap. Those are not cheap. The top-notch investigators, are charging $5 an hour these days. The issue in Sanborn, to my knowledge, it started with parents going to the police. The police investigated and then contacted the administration, and the administration put certain individuals on leave, or then one teacher got arrested, if I'm not mistaken, and then other individuals have been placed on leave as the investigation is ongoing. And you have a duty of confidentiality, obviously. I've never been to Las Vegas, but I say non-public session is like Las Vegas, and what do they say about Vegas?
Stays.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Non-public session, I say, is the exact same thing. And you've got a responsibility to the board, to the district, and to the people whose reputation or rights may be impacted, the staff member or the student. So I understand it's frustrating for the board to feel like you don't know the information, but there's a reason that you're not being fed the information. And, yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
No, the other thing too, if you would just touch, I know we all know it, but it also is always good to hear it every year, is when you get to the social media part is, yes, we're individuals, but when it's a school matter, or it's on a school page, or it's on the SAU pages,
Yep.
if you chime in,
Yep.
the impression is you're doing it as a school board member.
Yep.
So to just, again, the confidentiality too, is the
Yeah.
things that we get emailed to
Yep.
should not be copied and put out on social media. We are to be held to a higher standard as a school board member.
Right, yeah, I understand that social media is just it's woven into many fabrics of our lives these days. And, social media, it's it can be used for great things and it can be used for not great things, right? It's fantastic for the boards that use it, whether or not it's Twitter or Facebook or whatever, or Instagram. You put something out, FYI, the school board meeting has been moved from the library to the conference room. Or congratulations to the basketball team, congratulations to the reminder, permission slips are due for the elementary school trip to the York Zoo tomorrow, right? That's fantastic. Pushing out information, I think is fine for, to some degree I'm less crazy about individual board members doing it. If you're going to run a page that is, Jenny Jones for school board or Jenny Jones Winnicott school board member, please follow up with our staff attorney. Meredith News, we recommend that a disclaimer go on your personal page that you're not, though I am a school board member, I'm not speaking on behalf of the school board, and all comments, are mine and mine alone. If people are arguing on Facebook, has anybody ever changed anybody's mind by posting anything?
It's
You
therapy
clarify,
online.
hey, and if you just, an innocent comment, hey, Joe, I saw your comment about that. Here's Meredith's email address. I think you might be mistaken about the budget a little bit. Contact Meredith and she'll get the info for you. you're gonna get 10 extra, get 10 more response. Meredith doesn't know what the hell she's talking about, she makes way too much money, I wouldn't trust her with my life. Right? It's just, I'm trying to help you.
It's almost like a checkbox.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm trying to help you out, Joe, by pointing you in the right direction to the person that can answer your question. And the 20 other people in town have no interest in the conversation, so.
And you're assuming somebody would like something factual?
It's alternative facts apparently. But anyway, that's just, and again, just don't disclose anything on, any of your school board information. I mean, if you're really insistent on it and you really think you need to jump in and, because somebody's so completely wrong, okay, but do so at your own risk. I guess is the best thing to say.
Just briefly to jump back to right to know, on the table behind Rhonda are 2 boxes that are filled with a stack of papers. Those represent one of about half a dozen right to know requests that we're currently working on. Some of those are for school board member emails. What you put in email, if you're copying a quorum of the board, is generally going to be a public record, unless it contains some confidential information that can be withheld under the law. So we have to then go through and redact hundreds of pages. I think we've spent, about 50 hours?
Also.
Just on this one request.
Very early stages.
I can only imagine where it came from. So the other thing too with emails, if all 5 school board members are copied on an email, you gotta make sure you have a policy and a practice as to who's going to respond. More times than not, it's the board chair, but you gotta be mindful of you can't have 5 school board members emailing back and forth with Joe constituent about their one inquiry. You gotta have one person doing that. And most times, more times than not, it's going to be, the question is not going to be something that's within the board's bailiwick anyway. It's going to be something that's an administrative function. Policy and budget, that's within the board's function. The boiler not working, the bus is not running on time, the staff member who's coming in chronically late, that's an administrative function. It is. As an individual, as a board, even as collectively, or as an individual board member, there's nothing in law that allows you to go into that 2nd grade teacher's classroom and say, we hear you're chronically absent all the time. That's an administrative function. The board has no say, no right, no authority to do anything over employees other than the non-renewal stuff that we talked about earlier as well too. So, but yeah, you've got to be mindful. Just especially like if the email comes in to all 5 school board members and you hit reply all, and then another board member hits reply all, and then another board member hits reply all, you maybe get into a conversation among the quorum of the school board that has not been noticed, right? It's a meeting of the board. Contemporaneous communication among the school quorum of the board is the definition of a meeting.
Do you recommend then whoever the person is that's designated to respond, so if it's the chair, just respond to that person and not reply all?
Respond to that person, CC the superintendent, blind copy the other board members.
Got it.
So they see in their inbox that it has been
Taken care of.
It has been responded to.
Okay.
But then if there's blind copied and they hit reply all, it's only going back to you then.
Got it.
They can't, it's not going back to a quorum of the school board.
And then on these right to know emails that we keep getting, and there's like 100 people being copied, can we opt out on those? So somebody's doing a right to know.
And
they're copying
the governor,
all of
the
us.
president, the attorney general's
Every one of
office.
us gets it. So can we opt out on that, or just leave it?
It's an interesting question.
Because they go back and forth. You know what I mean? It's like.
I mean, so you're copied on the entire back and forth communication between. I mean,
I've seen people say, like, please remove me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what I would
exactly.
recommend, rather than the individual board members doing that, and this is just off the top of my head, follow up with Will if you want. My first thought is that the board chair reply to the individual, copy the superintendent, BCC the other board members, and explain, dear Mrs. So-and-so, the board is being copied on this. This is, at this point, it's an administrative function. We respectfully request that you not copy the board members on this. Our superintendent has been instructed to notify us relative to the developments of this matter.
Okay.
Something, I mean, that's pretty good. I made that up.
That was good. That was really good. Now, what'd you say again? See if we can.
I'm gonna say
Right.
it again. I don't know what I said.
Yeah.
Can we record the meeting? Yes. Can we play that?
Rhonda, you got that written down? Good girl.
I'm not crazy about an elected official sort of opting out or blocking email from a constituent.
Right.
you know.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I get both sides of it. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's easy to just ignore it,
But
but.
if you want more info on there, reach out to Will or something like that, and he may have some ideas on how to, you know, it's.
Nicely.
I'm sure your inbox just gets flooded then with,
Yeah.
from one person with the same,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Chairwoman, may I
Yes.
ask a question?
To ask, to remind people that your SAU 21 email is for school board
Yes.
business.
Right.
It's not to be doing your browsing online and using it as a junk email to get.
Don't, don't,
Yeah, to
don't.
log into accounts, because if a right to know request comes in and we have to provide that, we're providing that if it's allowed.
Will has a funny story from like 15 years ago when boards were just kind of getting used to using email, where a board member, I don't know if it was inadvertent or he just wasn't thinking, used his school district's email and emailed his wife, was just say some risque comments.
Yeah.
That was back in the day.
Yeah, school board email address, school board matters only. Don't email your spouse and say pick up a half gallon of milk.
Yeah.
Don't email your spouse, you know, I'll be home, meeting's running late, I'll be home at, 10:30.
Yeah.
Don't, just school board email for school board business.
And just remember, anybody can read it.
Yep, that's right.
So.
And, you know,
Public account.
Yep.
anything that you don't wanna see on the front page of Seacoast Online or front page of
That's it.
Union Leader, don't put in writing.
Yeah.
So question, constituent sends an inquiry about board matters to your personal email. Can you forward that to the chair and say, or how
Well,
do
I
you?
mean, I've blocked your
Yeah.
email, so it's fine. No.
What
How do you-
I would do.
So Meredith, would you help me when Leslie's not listening?
Yeah, what I would do
trying
is,
to help.
I would reply back from your personal email
Yeah.
with a copy to the board chair, a copy to your school district SAU 21 email, and a copy to Meredith,
That's good.
and say, you know, hey Sally, thanks for the email, FYI, I'm using I'm trying to not use my personal email for school district matter. Here's my SAU 21 email. Anything relative to the school district, please use that email address. FYI, the board chair and superintendent are copied on this as well too. One of them will get back to you with the answer to your question.
All right, so, and similarly, a constituent emails me alone a matter that's really should be before the whole board. Do I do the same thing?
Yeah, so we
Copy
recommend.
Leslie and Meredith?
Are they emailing you to your personal email?
Well, not yet, but you never know.
But you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, what you do is, you know, I think, you know, you wanna be respectful of the person's concern, but you also have to be mindful that you've gotta run through a process now.
Yeah.
And I think that process is, you know, I mean, you know, maybe if it's somebody you know, maybe give them a call first and say, hey, per board policy, this is why you want policies, cause it doesn't fall back on you as an individual then, right? It falls back on the collective, this is what the board decided, and this policy's been in place for 15 years, right? But it doesn't, so you just say, hey, we've got a policy that this is how we handle things. Are you okay if I forward this on to the board chair and the superintendent? If they say, no, please don't, then the matter dies. If they say, yeah, that's fine, or I'll email them myself, then you've got your cover there.
All right, so do we have a policy related to this kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I'll go read it.
Yep. Yeah, you're gonna have
Essentially
two
your public
two
complaint.
policies on complaints. One is gonna be about employees and students and personnel, cause that invokes different levels of privacy and different responsibilities. The other is about general, you know, school district operations. Hey there, I don't know if you noticed there were rusty nails on the playground at Elm Street Elementary School. Hey, can we do something about the potholes in the parking lot? That kind of stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
with the reply all. If it's just simply, like if all of us are just wondering who's attending, because we wanna make sure there's a quorum.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Right.
so quick, just as a little plug, I don't have the dates in front of me, I apologize. I know we are doing a webinar on electronic communication at some point. I wanna say, I think it's some point in April, I don't remember when. And FYI, we do record these and send them out afterwards, so we recommend if you subscribe, webinars are an additional fee, but if you're one of our subscribers, just register anyway, and you'll get the recording and the email within 24, 48 hours.
In board docs under this agenda item for NHSBA training, I have the link in there. If you click, it'll take you straight to their page with all of their updated webinars.
So you can't get into substantive communications via email, right? That has to be done in an open meeting. But we say, what I'll call, administrative or ministerial, hey, we have to hold an extra meeting because of X, Y, Z. Is everybody, please send me your availability as soon as possible. Or here's a doodle poll I put together for the 3 times everybody might be available. I think that's fine. You gotta be mindful then if somebody doesn't respond back and says, I really don't think we should be meeting, I think the contract covers this, and somebody else as well. You gotta be mindful about that level of conversation. And oftentimes that email is gonna come out through the central office anyway.
Just briefly on that, the other thing I would say, sometimes a board member might send a request for information, what time's the meeting next week, or I'll reply to that individual board member. If a board member is sending a request that requires me to work with Matt or Mary or Shay to pull together a lot of information, I'm gonna send that information to all the board, but depending on the volume and the time that's required for that request, that may be something where the board really should discuss whether or not it wants the administrative team to spend its time gathering that information.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, getting back to sort of, one of the first things we talked about, no individual board member has any inherent authority, for the board. So, Meredith will be, willing to comply with your request for information up to a reasonable point, right? But, you don't necessarily have, nobody sitting around the table has any authority to say, Meredith, I want you and Matt to run all these spreadsheets for me, and I want it in this format, and I want it, this data and information, and oh, by the way, I need it by next Tuesday night. You don't have the authority, as an individual board member, you don't have the authority to do that. If you, as an individual board member, want to talk to your board chair and say, put it on the agenda, financial reports, and the board sits and has a conversation, and the board says, Meredith, we want you to direct Matt to get us these spreadsheets in this format and have it by Tuesday before every meeting. That's the board's prerogative, and Meredith's gonna tell you whether or not that's doable or not, but, again, if it's simple, hey Meredith, can you send me a copy of the budget? You can do it, you know what I mean? Hey Meredith, can you send me, I can't find a policy on student discipline, can you send me the policy on student discipline? Yeah, Rhonda or whoever will get it to you, but just be mindful of the administrative time that's being spent on internal requests that are coming from board members.
So I know at least one board is looking to do individual training with the School Board Association. That's available to any of you, and if you've got a few new board members, it might be useful to think about that. It gives you more time to sort of dive into some of these more complicated issues. There's a learning curve.
Yeah, there is a learning curve, and we did the role, I think I probably went about maybe 45 minutes, I apologize, with the roles and responsibilities. It's tough to do that in less than an hour, and I wanna be respectful of everybody's time at your own local school board meetings as well too, but most of the times when we sit down and and I like to sit down, I hate standing up to do a presentation, I really do. And Meredith, you've seen me at some of your other boards that you've worked with. When I do a roles and responsibilities training, I sit down at the table with the board and we have a conversation. I don't use slides, I don't use technology. I sit down and I have a conversation with the board, so you can hear what's on your mind, whether or not it relates to roles and responsibilities or whether or not it relates to whatever else is going on in your school district. But, I tend to tell boards, schedule an hour, but don't be surprised if it goes an hour and a half. And I've had some where They've scheduled an extra, I'm not asking you to do this by any means, I wanna be respectful of everybody's time, but some boards call me in as an extra meeting to do the roles and responsibilities training. That's usually if it's like a first-year superintendent, there's like 4 new school board members, you know? And there've been times I've done this for, we've sat there for 2 hours and 15 minutes, so my time is always your time. We're a service organization, we're here to serve our board members, so if that would be helpful to do more detailed individual training, happy to do that at any time. Be mindful of all our webinars. Again, even if you can't make it, sorry, burping again, most of them are at noon, and we found that's just, I mean, it's never a good time, right? I understand you're all working at noon, and if we do them at 6 o'clock at night, you're at the soccer game or the baseball game or doing dinner time with the kids. So we do them at noon, and we try and send those out via the recording out within 12 to 24 hours. So we say just register anyway, presuming that your board pays for the subscription, because if you don't pay for the subscription, we're going to bill you, even if you don't get a chance to watch it, or bill you if you want us to send a recording to you. But if you've already paid for it, any and all board members can go to any and all webinars at no additional charge. So that's why we say just sign up for it, and you'll get an email with the recording. You can watch it in your own time. And I think we're building out a place on our website too to store them. I don't know where we are in that status, but we're looking at doing a password protected aspect, so you don't even have to wait for the email. We'll put them up there, and you can go in and look at them whenever you want. So
We have a subscription? So, no
Just have to
billing?
let everyone know.
No billing, okay,
Yeah, just let
right.
them know.
I think all the boards do, and that's
Okay.
I think now, Amanda's the assistant up there, she's pretty good at, like, when somebody does register, if you haven't notified me, she's sending me.
Amanda, she's the best.
Good.
She goes on vacation, we have to shut the office down.
Oh, sounds like a
Anything
risk to
else
me.
for me? Anything else that I can answer?
Thank
All
you
right,
very
if you give me
much.
just 2 more minutes to let me wrap up. First, thank you again for inviting me to Winnicott High School to present to the many boards that comprise SAU 21. Meredith, I love that we do this every year, part and parcel, regardless of how many new board members you have. I think it's fantastic. We can book next year's right now if you want. So. But anyway, thank you for having me out. Most importantly, thank you for your continued membership in NHSBA. It's your membership in NHSBA that allows us to do the webinars, that allows us to do the training, that allows us to do the sample policies, that allows us to provide the services that we do. Worked with Rhonda for a number of years. Leslie, I know we've worked together a little bit. Meredith and I have known each other for a decade now, if not longer. She has myself and our staff attorney on speed dial as needed, so she knows how to get in touch with us. But thank you again for having me. Have a wonderful night. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Barrett.
Okay. So we'll move on to approve the minutes from January 30th, 2025.
Do you want to close public?
Oh, yes, thank you, Leslie.
Yep, no worries.
Close public comment at 7:31. Motion to approve the minutes as presented for January 30th, 2025.
I'll second.
And that was Desiree
Yes.
and Nicole second.
Thanks, Barb. All in favor? Are you ready?
You know what, we've got people that were there and that weren't
Oh,
there,
okay.
so we're gonna need some people to abstain that weren't there. If it's okay, I'll just call names.
Yes,
and
perfect.
You guys know you weren't there. Alex?
I'm abstaining, was not there.
Andrew?
Abstain.
Ashley?
Abstain.
And Casey? Desiree?
Yes.
Gisella?
Yes.
Hillary? Lacey?
Yes.
Leslie?
It says I'm not there. Am I there? Yes, but I'm not on the list.
It said you're absent. You're under the absent list.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Lisa? And Michelle?
Yes.
Nicole?
No?
Yes.
Tracy?
Abstain.
Okay.
And Tricia?
Yes.
And Wendy?
Yes.
Thank you. January 30th. It's easier to do that.
I'm sure it's a lot easier for you. So we have action items. We have, a proposal for solar, I'm gonna need glasses soon.
Feasibility.
Yes, solar feasibility proposal.
Matt's gonna speak to that.
Good evening. So I have included a proposal in board docs. It is from Competitive Energy Services, so CES. This is the company that we work with annually on our energy contract. So we bid out and negotiate our electricity, natural gas, oil, and propane. And they also offer other energy solutions. We worked with them to set up the group net metering agreement that we are currently under with to capitalize on tax credits utilizing hydro. And this proposal is a phased approach. It's really to look at the feasibility and what those potential benefits are for if we were to put an on-site solar arrays on each of our schools. So this is not that decision as to that ultimate decision as to whether any one of our school districts is interested in solar is that individual school board's choice. And it will likely look different by school based on a number of factors, and it may make sense in some districts but not in others. But this feasibility study, CES will review the potential locations of the solar. Typically the cheapest option is always ground mounted, but typically schools are well situated to mount solar on rooftops. There's a lot of flat space. Obviously there's some factors there when it comes to the condition of the roof and how new it is, whether it can support it structurally. CES will also estimate the system, that's the size of the system that's required, and also look at the energy consumption and determine the need. That analysis will look at potential savings and then the impact from a budgetary standpoint for those to install solar. There's also a factor of utility tariffs and energy load profiles, and those will be evaluated as well. So based on this analysis, CES will provide us with a detailed analysis, and then we'll look at what our best options are. That does not only factor into whether it makes sense, on where it makes sense on site, but also what the funding mechanism is. It could be a lease program, it could be purchasing outright, we could finance it directly. There's the question of whether to hook into the utility, because we could have the option to sell back the electricity, or it may be that based on our consumption, it doesn't really make sense. So that's like before the meter or behind the meter. In addition, this proposal you'll see also includes an RFP process. If we were to decide to go to that next step, CES can prepare and issue an RFP to solicit proposals from the various solar carriers. They would compile any relevant documentation, they would draft that RFP, and then identify those qualified bidders. They would work with us to evaluate the bids, and then provide a recommendation if we were to go down that road. And then finally, there's a third piece, which would be selection and contract negotiation. They would assist in that negotiation process, we work with legal, and determine what the best way to contract that type of agreement. Now so those are 3 phased approaches. What we're asking for tonight is to do phase 1. So we're asking to do the feasibility study. That's $8,000. And we feel that structured approach will, help to ensure that we can kind of assess whether this makes sense, what the impact will be from a financial standpoint, and then we can kind of determine whether we want to move forward. So this would be a feasibility study for each of our districts, including the SAU office, so that would be 6 different sites. And then from there, and that would be paid out of the SAU operating budget. And then from there, it would be up to the individual districts to decide whether they would like to go forward individually.
Is that 8,000 for all of them?
So that's 8,000 total.
Sweet.
But then is the request for proposal, would that be per school?
So that's a good question. So the request for proposal is $4,000 per RFP. Now, if 3 districts decide to go out to RFP, that would only be $4,000. So the only kind of differentiating factor would be if one district decides to do it this year and then another decides to do it 2 years down the road, then that would be $8,000. It's $4,000 for each process.
Okay.
So phase 1 is 8,000 in total for all of us.
Correct.
You know what, the scope of work though, it says 2 on-site project locations.
Yeah, I actually I noticed that today. We'll have that corrected.
Okay.
But it's absolutely all the sites. That's a typo.
All right, I just would recommend that each site is listed in the statement of work.
Matt, I have a quick question. I don't know that this would behoove us, but I know several of our communities have community energy committees. Have we thought about maybe outsourcing some resources to them rather than going straight through with this company?
So we'd absolutely be interested in leveraging some of our existing resources. Actually, Jason Farias had mentioned that group as well in Hampton Falls. That being said, this may be a little bit outside of that
Realm.
purview. This is a little bit
big
more
project, yeah.
advanced than I think that type of committee would do. Now, we would consult with them and maybe work with them on this type of project, but I think it's asking a lot to have them do this
Type of
project.
work, sure.
Right, and particularly when we're talking about the SAU as a whole, when it's individual by town.
Sure.
They could be invited to participate in evaluations of the RFP responses.
Sure.
For the individual districts.
Yeah, and we're not required to use them to do it. We could issue our own RFP, if,
It's a lot of work.
Right.
You don't need more work.
This is the type of project I would prefer to utilize a third party. However, we have that discretion to make that decision. So.
And my second question, as much as I love the idea of solar and popping these things up everywhere, I know that we live in New Hampshire and we're not known for our cheap power, and I'm just wondering if this is, in your opinion, the time for us to strike with this type of project, considering the different variables happening.
Well, New Hampshire does not have any state-based incentives that assist with us. That being said, we do have the federal incentives. So previously, the Inflation Reduction Act instituted some changes that helped tax-exempt entities. So previously, before that act came into place, there wasn't a good financial case to do solar for a tax-exempt organization, because we couldn't benefit from the tax break. However, and when I say we couldn't benefit, you could use a third party to monetize that. However, that cuts into they have to get paid, right?
Sure.
So that cuts into the financial case. This actually is, from my perspective, is a good time because there's we're talking with CES and then some other energy groups. They are confident that we are okay with the federal incentives for the time being. However, that might change in the future.
Yep.
So I would prefer to capitalize on what we have currently.
Okay.
And the fact that energy rates are high in New Hampshire actually benefits us with this type of project because we're not paying those higher costs, right? We're generating our own electricity, our own power.
Is part of the first process, would they do that kind of comparison to show the savings? So
That's exactly what this process is. It's to look at the numbers, what we consume, how much it will cost, and then it's a math equation, right?
How much we consume.
And it may not make sense, but we think it's worth exploring because I know at a high level it's probably a 9 to 10 year payback. However, I want and it used to be 18 years. But I'd like to actually look at the actual costs and really determine what that real number is so that then we can make a decision, an educated decision moving forward.
So Matt, another question. Do we, or would they recommend where to put the solar panels?
Yes, I mean, it'll likely, in most cases, it would be rooftop. We don't have land to place them on the ground unless we actually cut down trees, which seems somewhat counterproductive.
It defeats the purpose.
I love the solar, the solar over parking lots. Those are great. We have them. I live in Beverly, and we have them all over the city. That increases the cost by 30 to 40%. So it's not really the most cost effective. And actually, I've heard some horror stories as far as snow removal. You'd think it would help, and it helps in a certain respect from protect. It's almost like a carport, but
Then it slides off if there's a lot.
But the actual plowing around is very difficult.
Yeah.
We have such a huge roof, I think it would be great for solar panels.
So we're kind of aligned, we have a huge roof project that just got approved. So that's the next 3 years. And so we just need to be strategic with how we, if we were to go forward with, is when we would implement a project like this. So for Winnicott, we'd be looking at 4 years down the road if we decide to go forward. Northampton has some actually all of our districts have pretty new roofs. So this is a good time to, if we're going to look at it, this is the time to do it from a roof condition. Because generally speaking, you want to align a new roof with solar, if it's going to go on the roof.
Yeah.
Okay.
Matt, would the
That's good.
feasibility then also include that information on the age of each of the roofs on the buildings, and therefore, would they also recommend a schedule or a potential schedule? Is that part of the scope of the feasibility?
Yeah, so it would, it would
squeeze
certainly
it.
evaluate the condition of the roof and to
Okay.
whether, they will tell us
Viability for solar.
if we need to replace the roof, which
Okay.
would not be ideal, right?
Yeah. All right, sounds great.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the solar feasibility proposal for SAU 21.
All in favor? Right. Motion passes. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Next on the agenda is policies. Second read and approval.
So as noted in your agenda, these policies were reviewed by the policy committee at the end of January. So these are a second read. I've not received any comments or questions from any board members since that time, but happy to answer any.
Motion to approve the adoption or withdrawal as recommended for the 19 policies as presented.
Second.
All in favor? All right, motion passes.
Have that motion recorded.
And then policies first read and adoption.
Yes, so some of your boards have already most of your boards, I think, have already talked about these policies. These are our Title IX policies or Title IX related policies. The prior Title IX rules were vacated fairly early in this administration and presidential administration, and so our direction from legal counsel is to revert to the 2020 Title IX policies and rules. And so the School Board Association has drafted these policies in accordance with the 2020 Title IX rules that are currently the law of the land. So we would ask that you waive the policy on adoption in order for us to adopt and implement these right away.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to waive joint board policy BGAA and approve the adoption as recommended for 6 policies presented.
I'm sorry, is there a question period yet, or is that after the second?
This is already, the prior rules were just vacated, so they don't exist. Oh, questions for you after the second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Second
Oh,
first,
motion.
then
Yeah.
discussion, sorry.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
Do I have
I'll
a second?
second that.
Go ahead.
Okay. Discussion?
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
Point of
Just
order,
for you,
you know how long
Trace.
it's been since I read Robert's Rules of Order? So our vote on this means that we approve just reversion back to the 2020 set of policies. An
That's correct.
abstainment or a no vote on this, would that mean that we don't agree with the new administration's revised position on the Title IX?
I mean, certainly people can vote no for any individual reason, right? So if that could reflect your perspective, other people could vote no for different reasons. I would say as a recipient of federal funding, we're required to abide by these policies in order to continue to accept that funding. So at the joint board level, we don't receive any federal funding, right? The SAU doesn't receive any federal funding, but the individual district level we do. You know, there are a couple of substantive changes, and Mary can certainly speak further to this. Essentially, it goes back to the procedure for investigating Title IX complaints are different, and the other substantive change is with respect to gender identity not being covered as a discriminatory category.
So sorry, I have a quick question. So if we vote on this tonight, does that mean we're going to vote again at our individual boards, or we're just adopting it?
This is only for the SAU policies. Individual boards also have these on their respective agendas. Some have already taken those votes.
Right, okay. I guess I didn't realize, I read it as a first read, or a first read, and I don't know that I was ready to vote on it tonight. I know that it's federal law, and I know that federal funding is contingent upon that, but I also know that there are some things that are concerning in here. I personally think I would want a little more time just to make sure that we're operationalizing it the right way. And I know, is this draft policy from NHSBA?
It is.
So this also covers us legally if anything legally comes.
Northampton already approved this.
Oh. Cool, okay, never mind.
They already did this as March 16th. We're just now getting them on the SAU policies,
Okay.
with the same policies.
Yeah, I think most districts adopted in March.
Okay, never mind.
Any further discussion? Any other motion? Okay, all in favor of Nicole's motion? The original motion?
I guess we already voted.
Any
Nine.
abstentions?
Okay, so.
2,
and
3,
regular
4.
board who's abstaining?
Tracy, Wendy, Andrew, and Lisa.
And Hillary?
Tracy,
Oh, and
those are abstained? Those
Nope,
are-
I'm
No, I
not
thought-
abstaining,
Did Hillary,
Sorry.
did you have your hand up? Yeah, Hillary did too.
I'm sorry.
so I had Tracy, Wendy, Andrew, and Lisa as abstaining. Did I miss anyone?
Hillary.
And Hillary. I'm sorry, Hillary.
So, Andrew, Hillary, Tracy, and Wendy are the.
And Lisa.
And Lisa. Those are abstentions, not no's.
That doesn't go.
Correct?
Correct.
It's one of those things where it's just gross, but we have to vote, we have to do it because we're okay. But,
Well,
like,
again, that's a decision
Theoretically, we have
at
to
the
vote.
individual board level, that's a decision you can make as recipients of federal funds. If you choose not to adopt these policies, you are essentially saying you're gonna forego requesting and receiving federal funds, I think, because you could be subject to a non-compliance complaint,
Right.
and that would jeopardize your federal funding.
Right. But could you, just to go up, could you create a policy within your own school board that could protect certain students that fall under this policy? No?
No, because the federal law would trump that.
I know, but I'm just,
I know, yeah, I was thinking the same
Yeah.
thing, yeah, I know,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's always
I
trying
know.
to
Well, our-
Again,
our
you
hands are
can
tied,
if you choose to
unfortunately. It's like we can-
forego.
if
no,
we vote
okay,
against
no,
it
I get it, I just
on a
didn't know if there
stance,
was
I
some
think it's
sort of
great,
loophole,
because we
but-
all, I think everybody would vote against it, but the
Okay.
thing is, it's
So
like,
I've got
Political process.
yeah.
64
If we had the
Right.
Department of Education, it might be.
Yes, and then I
Right.
believe
And
the
you could
rest
make
are
it-
yeses.
you could
Are there
decide
any
how you want.
no's?
Yeah.
Are there any no votes?
I didn't see any no's.
No.
That was 9 and 6,
So pass.
or 8 and 6, because one person
Okay.
had a different vote initially.
Okay, so motion passes. To move on to other, migration to .gov domain.
This is exciting.
This is exciting.
You're about to find out.
That's always given us the exciting stuff.
The hearing.
It's pretty sad that this is exciting.
Well,
We have no lives, people.
Typically, when I come up is when people exit.
Yeah.
This is,
You want yours on every word
I mean, you may be familiar, if you're not familiar, a number of school districts have been victims of cyber attacks in recent months. This is unrelated to Power School. That was a breach of that company's database. It does nothing to do with that, but this has to do with individual districts being attacked. A neighboring district, well, not, another New Hampshire district, Pelham, recently experienced a cyber attack. They were shut down, all their technology was shut down for about 2 weeks as a result of that cyber attack. Required rebuilding lots of their information and systems almost from scratch. It is why we use systems like Power School, because storing much of our data in the cloud is more secure for us. However, we do have communications and systems that rely on our local website and our local email system. And so that's why Matt's going to talk to you about the .gov migration.
Thank you for what
Ta-da!
a lovely introduction.
Right?
Wow.
Did that well.
So we recently applied for and were selected to receive a cybersecurity grant, and that is through or from the Overwatch Foundation. So that grant is provided in partnership with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, DES, and the Department of Information Technology. So the Overwatch Foundation is a relatively new foundation. It was formed in 2022, and it's really in Concord, New Hampshire, and it is dedicated to the defense of homeland, the public's trust in the state of New Hampshire, and the security of United States critical infrastructure. So their mission is to protect and serve the public sector by providing grant-funded cybersecurity auditing and engineering, infrastructure and software modernization, and workforce development. So that's what Overwatch is. They'll be providing us, so they have a few programs, but for us, they'll be they'll be providing us a program called .gov in a box. Nice little ring to it. So what that means, and that's what Meredith alluded to, is SAU 21 and Winnicott will transition from our current .org domain to a .gov domain. So this impacts both our websites and all of our email addresses for staff and students. So the reason we're doing this is a few key areas. One is it will enhance our authenticity and reputation. So .gov domains do provide increased trust and credibility. It'll improve our security. What that does is it provides CISA provided spam filtering and security resources that really offer superior protection. So when I say CISA, that stands for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and that's a United States federal agency, and it's part of the Department of Homeland Security. So that's definitely who we want to be working with when we're talking about our student and staff data privacy. And then finally, it expands our funding opportunities. So what this does, getting on a .gov domain, is it allows us the ability to access certain grants and funding that's specific to .gov organizations, which weren't previously available to us. From a timeline and process perspective, we would be starting this in April. We'll first start with a cybersecurity audit process. Bless you. With CISA, and that will strengthen. That'll look to strengthen our defenses and improve our incident response capabilities. In May, Overwatch will conduct a security screening. And based on that screening, we'll determine whether we're eligible to become a .gov. If we're not eligible, then they would offer us some resources and recommendations on how to become eligible. But assuming we are, in the summer, Google Workspace would be renamed, and we've launched the .gov websites, and that would be through the guidance of Overwatch. Our goal is to launch, so SAU 21, it's got to be SAU 21 New Hampshire .gov or SAU 21.newhampshire.gov. Unfortunately, SAU 21 is too broad. It needs to be specific to and identify us specifically. And then we would, for Winnicott, we would do, so we have Winnicott Cooperative School District, so it would be wcsd.newhampshire.gov. So those are the two domain names.
We can't do. Okay.
Long term, we may try to consolidate those, but at this time, it's too complicated because of some of the underlying infrastructure that's in place to be able to do that smoothly. We would lose a lot of data.
And we'd lose it by just going like even WHS New Hampshire, not the Winnicott Cooperative. Are you
there are other WHSs.
in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, even in New Hampshire, so you have like.
Okay. And I guess my concern too is, I mean, this is not a political statement. I'm gonna preface that. Who gets in there? Like, who has access to
I had that same
.govs?
concern.
Because
Does that
I'm
mean
I'm
DHS?
sorry with what's in the news. But
I can answer that.
But I mean, I guess that's my biggest concern is the government that's in place right now. I don't want them in my school. So
I see.
I guess that's my concern is who has access to. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not wild about any federal government or.
Yeah, right now, unfortunately, education is on the chopping block, and I just don't want to be handing them our.
Everything?
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I'm uniquely positioned to talk about this one in particular. Because before I was working for the state of New Hampshire for the cybersecurity program, we set up the .gov, migration to .gov capability. And the reason you want to go to .gov is, first of all, if the federal government wants to access our infrastructure, they can do that now. So whether we're on .org or .gov doesn't necessarily matter. But what is better about being on .gov is that that domain name has to be approved by the state CIO. And once it's approved, you know that that .gov is definitely Winnicott Schools domain name. Right now, somebody could create winnicothighschool.org and they would look like us, right? Because they could get approved. They could even copy our website. They could copy all kinds of things and they could start taking donations if they wanted to. And so that's one of the reasons why we need to get off of the .org domain extension and get onto .gov. When you go on .gov, you also get perimeter and additional perimeter security tools from the Department of Homeland Security. So there's added protections that we can't support on our own, but the federal government can do for us. So I would be very much in favor of this, if it hasn't already been decided.
Well, let me ask you this. You say that they can access our domain now. I'm sure they could hack into it if they wanted to. I'm sure they have the capability.
Correct.
But if they have the .gov, then it's like routine and easy, and it's constant. It's not like they have to make an effort to get in there. In other words, right, but that's something I don't know. I'm asking that question.
Well, I mean, in the normal world, the only way for them to access anything of ours would be through a warrant and through the legal system.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So either way, whether it's .gov or .org, I mean, what we need to be worried about more are foreign adversaries, nation states who are attacking local cities and towns because they know we have weak cybersecurity versus our own government, which.
Our own government, yeah.
I
See,
know,
and
I know, it's
and
a
I
sad
disagree with that statement, because I think our own government is just as yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
So within our
Fair
.gov,
enough.
it's essentially our website, right? Our website footprints are changing and our email addresses will move to a .gov. Nothing else is would be on the .gov domain at this juncture. That's it. Our student information system is still a cloud-based proprietary system that we have a contract with.
The accounting system is still
Our Munis is still a
cloud-based, right?
separate cloud-based accounting system, so that may not, eliminate your fears, but just to be clear, we're not talking about them having access to all of our student data and information.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to be, I apologize, but it's just, I don't have any faith in our government right now, and especially with education, so that's what just makes me a little nervous, but I
I would
get
say
it.
another aspect of this, Primex, our insurance carrier, right now, we've seen they've seen skyrocketing rates to purchase cyber insurance. One of their recommendations to districts moving forward is to move to .gov.
Are they gonna drop the rates then?
Oh my God.
Sorry, but I mean,
If
if we're
claims-
doing
If
that,
claims
are we gonna
decrease-
reap any benefit from them?
Well, long-term, I guess ostensibly, if claims decrease and rates decrease, but no, they're not gonna just give us a.
They're not gonna give us a break for doing it, so it's like they can recommend anything, but.
No, but at some point in the future, they may require it, right? To support their municipal and school district clients. That's not the case at the moment.
And this is just information, a discussion, this requires no motion?
So we were presenting this as informational for the board, however,
Yeah.
there does seem to be some
Right.
strong sentiment, so if you wanna take action, then this would be the time. If you want us to not pursue this, then we'd wanna vote to not pursue it.
So, personally, after, listening to what Tracy had said, I think this is, a great idea. I understand people's thoughts and feelings, and I respect them, but if we're thinking long-term, because if we're thinking political party, we're thinking, something's gonna happen. In 5 years, we're not gonna be in the same environment that we are in now, so I wanna think long-term in cybersecurity, and Thank you, Tracy, because you're a wealth of information on this.
She actually could have done my
Yeah,
presentation
yeah.
much better
Yeah.
than I did. I'm like, I'm getting nervous. I'm like, I hope I don't say something wrong.
Yeah. She'll let you know.
You did a great job. I was just privileged to write the grant for the state of New Hampshire that's providing these funds, so I'm just really glad to see them hitting the rubber is meeting the road on them versus just numbers in a spreadsheet, so I'm very pleased to hear the proposal.
It sounds reasonable enough, but no, my only concern specifically about what they can access. For example, I frankly don't care what administration is in charge just personally.
Yeah.
But it's you know, I could absolutely see them using AI to like crawl the information through emails. Oh, gee, we don't like what they're saying here. We don't like, not even whether schools, students, whatever. I mean, so that's my only concern. Now, you know, I don't like giving them one extra open door. Now,
But what I'm saying
what
is
is
that
your answer
it's
to that?
equally, they have equal capability to do it with .org or .gov.
Right.
And frankly, if you're on .gov, you're protecting yourselves from bad actors around the world. And take it from a former state CIO who had a cyber attack on their website, that would be me, from bad actors in Belarus. You know, these are the kind of things that you have to do. They're just fundamental, like locks on the door.
Right.
Because that's what I was gonna say too, is it's a protection. I totally understand everybody's concern, but when you think about like encrypting or things like that that can protect people from coming in,
Yeah.
that is what they're intending to do by going to like a .gov. So I would highly recommend it because it is, that's where the risk is skyrocketing for how all those attacks and every single little thing for just having somebody be able to go through the spams, all that. I mean, I work for a federal contractor, and I can tell you get them on a daily basis where you have your own IT people sending fake ones, testing your employees to ensure, do you even understand that policy? So I'm like always vigilant of like all that
It's a
stuff.
fish.
So it's all
Somebody's
protection.
fishing.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
all, so I mean, any
Yeah.
bit that you can do to protect, I totally understand all the concerns. I have all the same
Yeah,
concerns.
so do
Yeah.
But I
I.
just
No,
think
but
you
I
gotta
get
look
the-
at
yeah.
it from
The
a
town can go on
software,
one.
like a
Yeah.
protection of a
Mhm.
software thing.
No, I get it.
Accessibility.
I do get it, and and from the foreign one, it's, you know, I get that, so I just.
I have the same
It's
concerns.
information,
Yes.
right?
So-
Either way.
Cybersecurity is what keeps me up at night because schools,
Yeah.
like, they're a target now.
Vulnerable.
It's a wealth of data and information, and students in particular it's a very dangerous target because their identity could be stolen and you have no idea until they're 18 or 20 and they try to open a credit card or a bank account or whatever, and then it comes back. So it's really, they're targeting schools because also schools have less funding and they have less protections than large organizations. So it's something that I completely understand the concerns, but I'd strongly recommend that we move forward with this.
Does everybody want to take a vote, or do we all feel comfortable moving forward? I guess that's a vote, I
That would be
guess. Yeah, so let's just, does anybody want to make a motion? That way
Yeah,
we
I
can just
think
secure this?
we should make sure that it's on the record
Okay.
that we have voted to make this move.
Would you like to make the motion?
I would.
Tracy?
I move to move forward with the migration of our website and our email from its current domain name to whatever domain name .gov is determined by the administration.
I'll
Is that too
second.
lengthy?
I'm gonna trust Rhonda
Okay.
to capture that.
All right.
And we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, I think Desiree did, yep. All in favor? Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to start that whole thing. I
No,
just meant
ask
like-
questions,
No,
that's what
I-
we're here for.
Leslie,
I
that
agree, it's a lot
sentiment
of-
is
lot of
completely
questions, yeah.
shared around the table.
I appreciate your input,
Yeah.
I very
Yeah.
appreciate your additional
Yeah,
input.
exactly.
And then Matt, you're up again with the finance report.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now this I could not even
And he's
touch.
gonna go home.
I gotta go.
See, they leave right there.
Sorry, Matt, it's not you.
No, I take no offense
Sorry, Matt.
whatsoever.
Don't like that, we shouldn't laugh.
I will, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have included the fiscal year to date expenditure and revenue reports on board docs. There's no significant change from our last meeting, which was at the end of January. We are currently tracking to finish the year on budget. While we don't anticipate adding funds to our unreserved fund balance, we do have a healthy current balance. If you recall, we're right around $386,000. And since the SAU is not able to set up expendable trusts, that unreserved fund balance is particularly important. We use it as a safeguard against any unanticipated costs that we may incur during the school year. It also allows us to fund any capital projects without a large increase to the operating budget. I've reported before, but for our new board members, we do have one capital project that is coming up relatively soon. Within the next 5 years, we will need to replace the roof at the SAU building. In any event, please note that there are still 3 months remaining in the fiscal year. We close June 30th. Of course, in those 3 months, we could incur additional unanticipated costs or potential revenues that we are not accounting for currently. And finally, I just want to note that I did include the fiscal year 2024 annual financial report. That's produced by Plodzik and Sanderson. That's our third-party auditor who comes in every year and conducts their annual audit. I had previously reviewed those results in the fall, but I'll just note that that this is the final published document. If you recall, we received no findings, we had no material weaknesses, and no deficiencies as part of this audit. So, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Matt. And so we will move forward to legislative and executive order updates.
Yeah, so I've received several questions from board members about effects of the executive orders, the impact of closing the Federal Department of Education, so I thought it would just be a good opportunity while we're all here to address a few of those. The first executive order that we received was regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so much of that is targeted at admissions practices in higher education, programs that provide awards based solely on gender or solely on race or ethnicity. Most of that has absolutely no impact on our day-to-day practices and function as an institution. The one area where we see a potential conflict, and we've added this to the next policy committee agenda, is that all of your boards have an equity policy which specifically mentions hiring and actively recruiting people to sort of match the diversity of your student body. The language around active recruitment would be in violation of the federal DEI order, so we will be bringing that policy before the policy committee to review. There are no other concerns that we have regarding that policy, that executive order, and that there was a Dear Colleague letter that followed that, as well as some technical assistance document from New Hampshire Department of Education, and again, no other information in that we felt impacted us. There was an executive order, that was a January order. There was another one about educational freedom and opportunities for families. So that one essentially is awarding discretionary funds to states for school choice. New Hampshire, as you know, has what they call educational freedom accounts, which are vouchers for students to attend schools of their choice, including non-public and religious schools. Tied into the legislative piece, there is a bill before the state that would move the threshold for people to access those funds from 300% of the federal poverty level to 400% in FY26, and would remove any cap on eligibility for FY27. What does that mean to you? It means potentially if you have students taking advantage of those from your local districts, that those funds are deducted from our adequacy funds. We become responsible essentially for those costs. They come out of our adequacy funding from the state. So just something to be aware of if that's a concern you have. You all receive information from the School Board Association, I believe, that lets you know how to contact legislators and members of the House and Senate Education and Finance Committees if you have questions about those specific bills. The third executive order pertaining to education was called Ending Radical Indoctrination in K-12 Schooling. There was a bill that came out in New Hampshire probably 2 years ago that has pretty similar language. None of that, again, is practice that we engage in. First of all, we're prohibited in New Hampshire anyway, but in my 30 years as an educator, it was never practice we engaged in. We don't say, Tricia, as a white person, you are responsible for slavery and you should feel terrible about that, right? That's not what educators do. We talk to students about slavery existed in the United States, right? People profited from slavery in the United States. But we talk about the facts, right? We don't talk about ideology. And so, again, no actions required for us to take related to that executive order. Fourth executive order pertaining to education was about additional measures to combat anti-Semitism. Again, that was largely directed at higher ed. No additional policies or practices. That's already covered under non-discrimination for Title VI for us, so no additional action for us related to that. Keeping education accessible and ending COVID-19 vaccine mandates, not applicable within the state of New Hampshire. Empowering educational outcomes, this is the one related to the Department of Education by empowering parents, states, and communities, which is the bill about closing the Department of Education. So we don't fully know what all the implications of that will be. I have the opportunity as one of the liaisons for our State Superintendents Association to meet with representatives from our congressional offices every month or every other month, depending on what's happening. From talking to those offices, from talking to my national association, from conversations at the state level and what we know from New Hampshire's education department, we don't anticipate any immediate impacts with respect to funding. Funding like IDEA, the federal funding that we receive for individuals with disabilities, that funding is expected to remain secure. That's a congressionally approved act, and so I'll come back to that in a minute, but the funding, the mechanism, those laws and rules still apply, right? Congress approved those laws and rules. So even if it's moved elsewhere, right, as is rumored to be, those laws and rules will still apply to us. The same holds true for Title I. Title I applies both to Winnicott and to Seabrook at this time, but that is funding to support schools with a significant or percentage of students who qualify as what the federal government calls low income. So that's some additional support that's provided. Again, we expect the program to remain intact. We don't know that to be necessarily true for some of the other title grants, although at this time we're still hearing for the upcoming fiscal year that those programs should remain in place. What I will say is what I've heard anecdotally is that we could expect sort of 1 to 5% reductions in funding across those different programs. The biggest challenge is not related to the closing of the Department of Education for us right now. It's about the fact that Congress has yet to approve a budget for the next fiscal year. And so that leaves us very up in the air about what those funding allocations will look like. Typically, we get those funding allocations in May or June for the upcoming fiscal year. So using IDEA as an example, we have a few staff positions that are covered in those. We know that, where those funds are coming from. The other unique part of IDEA, however, is that those are special education positions, and so even if that federal funding goes away, we are more than likely going to need to continue to provide those services and supports. So if that funding goes away, those costs are going to fall to your local budgets. Again, in the short term, I'm not anticipating that. Like I said, we may see a 1 to 5% reduction. There may be other reductions that occur, which would be related to census data in New Hampshire, for example. You might see a decrease in your Title I funding that's a result of how many students are eligible for Title I within your school. Beyond that, I think we're still kind of seeing how all of this unfolds. There is still a Department of Education. There is discussion that the National Assessment of Educational Progress may go away. That was one of the reasons cited for increasing educational opportunities and providing more choices that we're not doing well. I would just say, while nationally that data might not be great, New Hampshire is still in the top 5 nationally for both for reading at both grades 4 and 8, and we are 6th and 10th respectively for grade 4 and grade 8 math scores. They are not fully back to where they were post-pandemic at the 8th grade level, but they're pretty close in the 4th grade to either back or above where they were. So again, some of that national rhetoric isn't necessarily true in the state of New Hampshire. And those results I just shared with New Hampshire, ranking in the top 5 or 10 states in the country academically, is true even though New Hampshire's funding for education is 50th in the country. Meaning that New Hampshire's funding for education is all done at the local level, not at the state level. So again, I just want to make sure you all have the information. There are a lot of talking points. There's a lot of information out there, but I think it's important that you are kind of armed with the facts about what we know to be true for our districts and our states. So.
Can I make a comment? I don't know if I can slip this in here, and I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to do this, but I served for the past 2 years as the legislative liaison for the Northampton School Board, and I will say, although it's really eye-opening to see the legislative process and what's before the House and Senate, I do think that we were lacking on being able to catch bills before they went there and vote on them as a board. There seems to be similar frustration in SAU 90, and one of their board members reached out to me to see if our boards would like to collectively meet for legislative, like once-a-month sessions to try to keep up with the numerous amounts of legislation that end up before the House and Senate, so that we can actually get to vote on it as a board instead of, I saw HB 115 come by last week, and I was like, oh my goodness, I know we would want to vote on this. I can't call an emergency board meeting. And so I don't know if that's something other boards would be interested in, but I think that's on the table if there's interest. I don't know how that would work. Who would?
Yeah, so I think some boards have a legislative liaison, not all boards do. Right. But for those legislative liaisons to meet, right, collectively or with SAU 9, that's not a subcommittee of the joint board, right? Those are representatives from individual boards, and there's no quorum of the joint board, so that could just be
separately outside of this.
Yep.
Perfect. That's all I need to know.
Yep.
My name is Lisa Gagalis. If you want to look me up on the whole SAU 21 website, just shoot me a little email if you're interested.
Yeah, and just to clarify, if you're like, how does that work, right? Essentially, your individual boards have charged them with the responsibility of being the legislative liaison. They're not making any decisions on behalf of your board. They would have to call a board meeting or bring information to your individual boards to take any action. That's why it's
correct.
And each board would just send one, not so there wouldn't be a quorum.
Right, exactly.
Correct.
And so the hope is to be able to see what's upcoming, so that we can bring it to the board and say, hey, like, this bill is going to be heard next month. Do we want to send a letter to our, congressmen or senators or whatever, and say that we oppose it or support it, et cetera? Because unfortunately, the only way that we can only do that if we all vote on it, right, as a board. Otherwise, you can submit your personal opinion, but you can't do it as a board.
Yeah. There was some momentum to get this going last year, and then it never got off the ground with board members. I will say one challenge just to be mindful of is that the legislative process can move fast and furiously, and things you may see the initial proposal. By the time you see the next version, they're ready to vote on it because the amendments aren't always shared in a manner that allows people to react to them. So.
Yeah, and I 100% agree and acknowledge that, and I think that's one of the frustrating things in being able to react
From a timing perspective, crossover occurs April 10th or 11th, so this is a good time to make sure you're on top of those bills that are anticipated to move forward, either from the Senate to the House or the House to the Senate, so that your opinions are captured.
Well, and Meredith, if I'm correct too, from what I've been hearing, those executive orders that were issued, many of them are already being challenged legally. So we still won't know what the results are until they get through the legal process, right?
Yeah, again, most have really no direct
Yeah, right,
implications
I gotcha.
or immediate implications for us, but yes, you're correct, some are being challenged.
And for those that just want to look from home, the NHSBA does have a crossover day update that's coming up. It's April 11th, and you can register for it, and if you can't go to that webinar, you can get, like Mr. Barrett said, you can get the copy of it. They email all of you, pretty regularly, and they give an update weekly, as to what's happening, what's been changed, so you guys should get that.
Before, I don't know if it has to be done while being done. We had a very confusing vote on action listing and the policies, and then this doesn't have the
Yeah, I'm sorry, could our member from the Northampton School, please? Wait.
Oh, so, I was just going back and looking at the notes and that very confusing policy where we were like, yes, no,
Oh.
I was listed as a yes, and I just wanted to correct it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
In the meeting notes.
Yeah.
Is it better, I mean, I don't know if we can go back to that, can I just read who I had for what, just to make sure, because
So
it is easier
I
when
had
you do something
6
different
abstentions.
to keep your
So
hand
they were
out.
Hillary, Lisa, Andrew, Ashley, Wendy.
You guys are going faster than the names are listed in here.
Okay.
That's the problem.
There are these 5.
Get your hand up, and then that way I can.
For what?
The Northampton board abstained,
Oh, okay.
A while back.
and Tracy abstained.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, I thought I did too.
He did not abstain on that policy.
I abstained from the January 31st minutes.
Yes.
That's what it was,
Yeah.
not.
I had 6, I just had the wrong 6.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
Any other questions about the legislature?
Sure, just one more bill that I would point out for you. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's HB 675 is the statewide tax cap bill. So just so you understand, that essentially would mean every district across the state, irrespective of how much you're spending per pupil, the state would be setting a threshold, and no district could appropriate funding for the following year that exceeded that percentage increase. So if you're Seabrook coming out of a default budget and you're trying to, add back in additional positions or funds, right, to get back to your prior year level or to keep up, you might not be able to do that because that might exceed that threshold. So it just, my concern would be that in a situation like that, it exacerbates some of the inequality that exists with respect to funding for students. But I would encourage you to read that bill and gather some more information.
What's
Yeah,
the House
scary
bill
scary
number?
part is,
675.
if it doesn't move along, there's been talk about inserting it into the state budget, which has a decent chance of getting through. AOT has the opportunity to kind of make some revisions, but I think should be hesitant to hold up that process, for that particular piece. Excuse me?
She wouldn't veto it, because she wouldn't hold it up.
Right, because it remains to be
There's
seen, who
concern.
knows. But,
I mean, again, to me, I think the fundamental basis of the issue for that bill, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the districts, but New Hampshire is supposed to be about local control, right? That's one of the things we pride ourselves on. So it really just takes that decision-making out of your hands as board members at the local level. So.
That's it, Lacey, I'm done.
Okay. Sorry. No, you're fine. All right, so we're gonna move on about, our upcoming family literacy event. And there is.
You know, it's really late, so we're only gonna take a couple minutes of your time. I wanna introduce Patrice Baker, who is our intervention outreach specialist and does amazing work, most of it behind the scenes with our families and with our students, and she's gonna tell you about this wonderful opportunity that we have, and you guys are gonna help us spread the word. Coming right up. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited to share the big news that Curious George is coming to town on April 12th. It's a Saturday from 1 to 3, and we're hosting a family literacy event here at Winnicott High School in the dining hall. Our goals for this event are, number one, to celebrate how much we love to read and to remind everybody of the critical importance of reading in the early years to set kids up for success later on in reading in school. We also want to inspire and motivate everyone to take the pledge. This comes from the Children's Reading Foundation. 20 minutes a day is their mantra. We're going to have kids and adults sign this beautiful poster that Mary Margaret made at the high school here. She's phenomenal. And so kids will be taking the pledge and going home with laminated calendars so they can keep track of their 20 minutes a day. Another goal is to get more books into the hands of more kids. We know there's a really strong connection between a home environment that supports literacy and having access to books and success in reading later on. And then the last goal is to connect families to resources. So we're going to have bags that will be filled with resources about literacy and home, supporting literacy at home and slimming down screen time and some other important topics like that. And then we also have a whole bunch of community partners who are participating. So this is a really nice example of a school community partnership kind of event. The Hatch Coalition is leading the way. The Hatch Coalition started in Hampton about a year ago. Hatch stands for Hampton Alliance for Thriving Children. And we have part of the Children's Museum of New Hampshire is coming, and they'll be offering free passes, family passes to the museum, plus Curious George books, of course. The New Hampshire Charitable Foundation gave us some funding for this event. The YMCA, Head Start, our local town libraries, school librarians, Seacoast Public Health Network, Waypoint, Child Care Aware, Seabrook Reads, Winnicott High School Interact Club. We did this event last year in Seabrook, and the Interact students facilitated all of our activity stations and face painting and crafts and bookmaking. So it was just a great volunteer project.
I still have my Pete the Cat headband, I would like you to know.
New hat for you this year.
Okay.
The man with the yellow hat, you know that?
Oh, perfect.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we're gonna bedazzle the hats. But also the child development class and the developmental psychology classes are involved. Last year and this year, they made these big, beautiful research boards, and they did all this research about, for example, this year one of the themes is outside play, why that's so important for kids, and they're creating these research boards. Yes, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned Seabrook Reads, because, this whole idea of getting more books in the hands of more kids is aligned perfectly with that project, with community bookshelves all around Seabrook. So I just wanted to share one anecdote to tell you how this kind of event can have an impact on a child and even a family. So last year we did Pete the Cat in Seabrook, and one mom told me that her little guy loved the bookmaking station. So he spent a lot of time in the afternoon making books at this one station, and he went home with some supplies, and he kept on making books. So this event last year was in April, and by Christmas time he was still making books, and he asked for a book stapler from Santa. So we, created this passion in this little writer, and so that's the kind of impact that this can have. One little inspirational story like that at a time. So, you have the flyers. They're posted around towns. They're out on social media. They're being shared through principals' newsletters, hopefully classroom newsletters. But any help you can give, I appreciate it. We have about 56 people signed up so far. We're hoping for 100 because the Children's Museum is bringing us 100 family passes, so we still have a few weeks and would love all your help in spreading the word. And I hear that I'm coming back in May to talk to you a little bit more about some of the early outreach initiatives we've been working on over the last 2 years, so I'll look forward to seeing you then. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
So George is coming to town.
Here, my favorite books.
want to go over some scheduling for future meetings. We have a communications committee meeting Monday, April 14th. And we have an operations committee meeting Wednesday, May 7th. And our next joint board meeting is Wednesday, May 28th.
And there will be a policy committee date, but we haven't set that yet because we were trying to figure out who the policy reps were and where we could slot it in. Yes, and we also will be scheduling a second legislative roundtable. We typically do one of those in April, so we're working on that as well.
Okay.
Nicole, did you want to speak briefly to the superintendent's
Sure.
evaluation
Yeah,
process?
we-
Should be on there.
Did I skip it?
You might have to refresh.
Oh,
because we
okay.
added it.
Sorry.
So Becky, 16 people completed the superintendent's evaluation that were eligible. Becky, the joint board chair, myself, the operations committee chair, we met with Meredith before our last operations committee and reviewed the evaluation. And, we felt it was pretty positive feedback overall. The full evaluation is available under the non-public section. You can see the full results of the evaluation. Was there more? than
Yeah,
that?
we can discuss it in
And if we
non-public.
want to discuss anything, we can do it in non-public.
Thank you very much. So do we have a motion to enter non-public?
Go ahead, Nicole.
I'll make a motion to enter non-public under RSA 91-A:3 Roman numeral 2A at 8:40 p.m.
All in favor?
Oh, no, we have to roll call.
Oh, roll call, sorry. Roll
Should
call.
be A and C, I think, if to the extent that you want to talk about superintendent's
Oh, yeah.
evaluation.
Okay, sorry, A and C.
Alex?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Ashley? Yes. Casey? Yes. Desiree?
Yes.
Gisella?
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Leslie? Leslie's gone.
She left.
Lisa?
Yes.
Michael?
Not here anymore.
Sorry.
Happens all the time.
Michelle?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Tricia?